Hey everyone, this is Mr. McNeese. Welcome to your first day of stat reasoning. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about graphing categorical data. Now, real quick, in order to take notes, I have if you go over to, this is our page on It's Learning, if you go to our resources, go to Unit 1 folder, and then inside there, there's a folder called Student Resources. And then inside there, there's a Unit 1 packet. So this packet contains all of our notes and our homework for the entire unit. So if you go to the second page, it'll say Day 1 Graphing Categorical Data. That's where we're starting here. Now, you can take your notes in many ways. You can type out your notes. You can write them by hand. You can do a hybrid of those two. I would suggest if you have access to a printer, I would suggest printing this out and then writing in it, because there are some parts where we're going to be having to draw graphs like you see here. So if you have access to a printer, that would probably be the best option. If not, you can just type on it and then maybe draw notes on a separate, or draw pictures on a separate sheet of paper, whatever works best for you. But we're going to be doing graphing categorical data today. So real quick, just a little bit of vocab. First thing is a variable. So there are two types of variables, categorical and numerical. A categorical variable are just outcomes that can fall into categories, such as win or loss, or if you're looking at someone shooting a basketball, there's make and miss. If you're talking about baseball, they might hit the pitch or miss the pitch, etc. So these are two different categories. Numerical variables are outcomes that are just numbers. So an example of this is number of yards. So anything that's just like distance, or time, or weight. These are all numerical variables. So if somebody asks, what is the speed of the pitch? 90 miles an hour. Okay, that is a number, so it's a numerical variable. Distribution, it just identifies the possible outcomes of a variable and how often it takes those outcomes. And there are three types of graphs that we're going to be talking about today. There's a pie chart, a segmented bar chart, and a bar chart. Pie chart, just like it's always been, it's a displays possible categorical outcomes as slices of a pie. A segmented bar chart displays possible outcomes as slices of a rectangle, with each area proportional to how often it occurs. And then a bar chart is just like a bar graph, like we've always seen. This one has separate bars for each of the categories. Now, segmented bar chart, imagine the bars from a bar graph, but they're combined. So something I want to point out is that a segmented bar chart will always be 100%. So they'll always go to 100%. Bar charts, they don't have to. And we're going to see a couple examples here. So pie chart, this one is just a pie chart. And you can see that each of the sections, each of the slices represent the different categories. So in this case, we're talking about made and missed shots. This one is a segmented bar chart. Okay, and notice each of these bars go up to 100%. Remember, they always, in a segmented bar chart, they always go to 100%. And we've got sections here represented by the key. We got sections for make and miss in each of the categories, or in each of the time periods, regular season and playoffs. And then down here, we've got the same data as the other two graphs, only represented as a bar graph or a bar chart, regular bar chart. Okay, and notice we've got separate bars, and they don't have to go up to 100% because they're separate like this. And so for this unit, you're going to need to know how to make each of these graphs as well as interpret. So if I were to give you one of these graphs, you can read it and say, oh yeah, based on this graph, he made 68.5%, missed 31.5%. All right, so as an example, it says, does uniform color make a difference? So a couple of researchers, what they did was they went to the US, or not the US, but the Summer Olympics in 2004, and they had each of the competitors wear red and blue, and they counted how many times the red player won and how many times the blue player won in each of these four types of fighting styles. So they had boxing, taekwondo, Greco-Roman wrestling, and freestyle wrestling. And what they want us to do, it says for each event, do the results in the table summarize a categorical variable or a numerical variable. So what I want you to do, pause your video, take a second, think about it. Think, is this categorical or is this numerical? And then we'll come back together and talk. Okay, so you've thought about it. Is this categorical variable or numerical variable? And if you're still confused, remember, you can always go back to our vocab. So look at categorical, outcomes in categories, numerical is numbers. So in this case, this is what would be a categorical variable. And the reason is because the outcomes are either red or blue. So if you're asking yourself, well, who won that boxing match? Red did, or blue did. Who won the Taekwondo match? Red or blue? So these are categories based on the outcomes of the fighting matches, okay? And it's asking us if the color each competitor was wearing has no effect on the outcome, what percent of matches would you expect the red contestants to win? So take a second, think about this, and then you can unpause your video and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so if color had zero effect on the outcome of a match, then what percentage chance does red have of winning? Well, ask yourself, what are the two possible outcomes? Remember, red can win or blue can win. So based on those two outcomes, it should be a 50% chance that red would win, right? So we can say 50% because there are only two possible outcomes. Okay, so 50% because there are only two possible outcomes. And what they want us to do is they want us to display the data with a bar chart. So remember, a bar chart is separate bars, right? We don't have to go to 100%. We have separate bars for each of the categories. And whenever we're doing a bar chart, we need to first get our data in percentages, okay? So if I go back to this, they didn't give us percentages of these. They just told us the number of wins that each of the colors got, and then the total. But we can use this data to find the percentages, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of just going to extend this graph over here, okay? I'm going to have bars or sections for each of the fighting styles. And so what I want to do, I see that red won 150 out of 272 boxing matches. So 150 out of 272. If you convert that to a percentage, you should get 55%. So in turn, since there's 100% total, if red won 55, that means blue won 45. So what I want you to do, I'm going to do this and I want y'all to follow along with me. So 45 wins out of 80. That should be, where's my calculator? 45 divided by 80 should be about 56%. So that means blue won 44%. 25 out of 51. So 25 out of 51 total. That means red won 49%. So that means blue won 51%. And then freestyle wrestling, red won 28 out of 54, which is 28 divided by 54. We get about 52%. And that means blue won 48%. So now that I've got my percentages for each fighter, red and blue, in each of the matches, I can start making my bar chart. So I'm going to have a y-axis and an x-axis, and anytime you're working with percentages, you always put those percentage on the y-axis. So remember, a bar chart does not have to go to 100%. It can go up to however high you need it. So if I'm looking at these percentages, my highest percent is 56. So I'm just going to go up to 60 by tens. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Oops. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay, and then down here, I'm going to have a section for each of the fighting styles. So I've got boxing, I've got Taekwondo, I've got Greco-Roman wrestling, and I've got freestyle wrestling. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 bars for each category. These bars represent number of red wins and blue wins for each fighting style. So for boxing, we said that red won 55% of the time. So I'm going to make a bar that goes up to 55%. And then blue won 45%. Okay. And then in Taekwondo, what was it? We had 56% and 44%. So red won 56% of the time. Blue won 44% of the time. For Greco-Roman, we had 49% and 51%. And for freestyle, we had 52% and 48%. So 52%, 48%. And all I want to do now, we don't want to leave the bars looking identical. We want to separate them a little bit, make them distinct. So what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a key that tells us what do each of the bars mean. I'm going to decorate one of the bars. I'm just going to kind of shade it. So I'm going to say the blank ones represent red wins and the shaded represent blue. Okay, so I'm going to just come in here and shade all my blue bars. And then we're done with the graph, creating it, only now we just need to describe what we see. So pause your video, take a second, describe what you see. Okay, so we can see that red won 3 out of 4 events. Blue only won Greco-Roman wrestling. Okay, so that's basically what we're seeing. You see the red bars are much higher than the blue bars, except for Greco-Roman. And the last thing it says is the following pie chart shows the number of red victories in each of the 4 sports. Explain why this chart does not help address the question about uniform colors. So take a second, digest this pie chart, figure out what it's telling us, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so why does this not help us figure out the difference between red and blue? Well, this shows the number of red victories, right? Where's blue? We can't really compare them if there's only one color, right? So the reason it doesn't help us is because there are no blue victories shown. We're not able to compare if there's nothing to compare. Since it only shows red, we're only looking at red. So we need a graph more so like this bar chart where we can see both red and blue on a graph. Okay. If you're just looking at one color, it doesn't really help us compare. So those are all our notes for today. What you need to do now is do the practice problems. So we've got the problems numbers 1, 2, 3, and 5. They should be right after our notes section in our notes packet. So go ahead, complete those, and then we'll move on to the next lesson. And also, if you have any questions, always, of course, feel free to message me. It's learning, messaging, email, remind, whatever way works best for you. If you have a question, feel free to let me know.